Hi, I'm Dr. Heather Athanasiou with Community in Crisis, and I'm here with my daughter Maddie Athanasiou, who's a sophomore now at University of Indiana, and she's here to present sort of the youth perspective. We are presenting Vape Free, Breathe Free, and this is sort of webinar 1 of 5. And this first one, we're going to be talking about COVID-19 and vaping and how those two together might be sort of the perfect storm. So let's get started. I'll let you take it from here.
So when it comes to vaping, kids commonly will hit each other's jewels or at parties or when they're just hanging out. And so what that does is it transmits their germs from a jewel to jewel, from mouth to mouth, which is a key way to transmit COVID, as we all know. So sharing devices or pods, or just the basic mechanics of vaping, picking something up with your hands, putting it in your mouth, may increase COVID-19 transmission.
We also have proof that, or they know that COVID-19 virus particles can be exhaled in the aerosol. And Dr. Winkoff, who's a director of pediatric research at the Tobacco Research and Treatment Center, says that they do see increased coughing in patients who vape or smoke. And when a patient's coughing and they have COVID, that increases the risk of spread more so than just breathing. So if you're somebody who smokes or vapes and you develop COVID, you're more likely to be coughing and putting healthcare workers and family members or whoever else you're staying at home with at an increased risk of picking it up themselves.
So this was a really shocking thing to think about for me. So what do you guys think all these people have in common? We have a group of senior citizens, a teen with a cigarette, and a cancer treatment patient. And what they actually all have in common is the fact that they're all at a really high risk for getting like the worst case scenario when it comes to COVID. They're immunocompromised. They're at a high risk for death when it comes to COVID, and they're immunocompromised. And I thought that was crazy that, you know, if I was a vapor or a smoker, I could be in the same category as my 85-year-old grandfather with heart disease. And that's really alarming to me. And although we don't have the exact facts to back up the vaping aspect of this, they do have the facts for the smoking, saying that smoking is causing people to be immunocompromised when it comes to COVID, and vaping isn't looking too good so far.
So let's talk about why that might be the case. Why would somebody who's vaping maybe be at a greater risk for COVID? And to look at that, you really need to sort of think about like, well, what's going into those lungs? What are we doing to our lungs? And a good place to start is sort of dispelling a common myth. A lot of young people and adults, for that matter, who started vaping believed, and were sort of led to believe by these companies, that you're just inhaling a flavored water, basically, like putting your head over a steaming teapot. But it's actually, you're inhaling an aerosol, not just a vapor. And the difference is an aerosol has small particles suspended in it. So it's more like spraying spray paint or hairspray down your throat. And let's talk about what some of those fine particles are. There are things like heavy metals, lead, nickel, cadmium, things you would find in lead paint or in battery acid. Formaldehyde is something that's used to preserve dead bodies, so it's an part of embalming fluid. And arsenic is something that's been used as rat poison in the past. Benzenes give gasoline and car exhaust that really noxious smell that makes you feel like lightheaded and sort of nauseous if you're around it too long. Formaldehyde and benzenes, we know, are carcinogens. They cause cancer. This is just a few of the chemicals that can be found in the aerosol. Again, this is not a complete list of chemicals that are found in the aerosol. And I wanted to, this slide we used to sort of point out the fact that the ones in red can be found in secondhand aerosols. So if you're just around somebody who's vaping, you can be inhaling these harmful things.
And if you're vaping, you're exposing those around you to those harmful things as well.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about a couple basic components. All e-liquids have, basically all of them have 3 main components. They have some bases and flavorings, and propylene glycol and glycerin and flavorings are some of those key components. So just to look at at two of these. Propylene glycol is a flavoring agent. It makes things sort of sweeter, and it is approved by the FDA. It's generally recognized as safe by the FDA for as a food additive. So it is safe to eat, and manufacturers of these products said, like, hey, our ingredients are safe, and they are if you're eating them, but they've never been tested or shown to be safe if you're inhaling them. Propylene glycol, again, just one example of what these ingredients can do. When you superheat it, can release formaldehyde gas. So it's something that's not really dangerous by itself, but when you superheat it, it becomes something like really, really toxic, and can at certain temperatures. Diacetyl is a buttery flavored component in a lot of different flavors that causes popcorn lung, and that can be irreversible lung damage. And this is just one flavor among thousands that are out there. And some flavors that are out there are created by combining many different flavors. And just to emphasize what diacetyl, this one thing, can do to lungs, it causes like considerable thickening in the lower airways, making it harder for oxygen and carbon dioxide to sort of transfer across that membrane. And it was sort of interesting back a couple years ago when they were first looking at vaping liquids and what might be in them. They found diacetyl in more than 75% of the flavorings they tested the most popular flavors back then, and it was in a lot of them, which is sort of scary.
And that's really scary. And I have had friends who were vaping, and they found it difficult to run up the stairs without running out of breath, and that can be sort of like a precursor to what popcorn lung is. Like, it's hard to breathe, it closes your airways a little bit, and that's really scary to think that like a 17-year-old is worried about being able to run up the stairs, like a small activity like that.
So maybe that's lucky that they were experiencing some milder symptoms of what was probably low-grade inflammation and irritation in those lungs, and hopefully that led them to want to quit. Some people aren't that lucky. We know from the end of last year, there were all these like thousands and thousands of cases across like all of the states, 50 states. They discovered EVALI, which they named e-cigarette and vaping associated lung injury. So you probably saw cases in the news where young people, like older and young people, but the ones who really sort of got the United States attention was these young teenagers who were otherwise healthy, a lot of them athletes, landing themselves in the hospital and being put on ventilators because machines needed to take over breathing for their lungs. Their lungs were so inflamed they could not any longer exchange, oxygen and carbon dioxide on their own. So what EVALI did is it proved that there's something going on, that these chemicals are damaging lungs. They're causing inflammation, and sometimes very severe inflammation and injury. Recent article that I was reading said these doctors were sort of, when they looked at the tissue samples from some of these cases, it was similar to what you would see if you had looked at patients that were exposed to mustard gas in World War I, or somebody that had been in a toxic chemical spill in a chemical plant and inhaled vapors from really concentrated chemicals being spilled around them. So it's almost like getting a chemical burn inside your lungs. So the CDC said a lot of these cases that they saw, the EVALI cases towards the end of like last fall and in the winter, a lot of them were associated with people that reported that they had vaped marijuana or THC, the psychoactive component of marijuana. But it's important to note that not everybody who ended up in the hospital had vaped marijuana. Some had just vaped nicotine products. So although the CDC says teens should not vape, and they should especially not vape marijuana, just because you avoid marijuana doesn't mean you're going to avoid serious injury to your lungs. And just like another little bit, and the reason I'm mentioning marijuana in a vaping talk is we had a significant increase in the number of, especially seniors at like High School. This is a local high school here in New Jersey. They do Wisely, they do a pride survey like every other year, sort of assessing like drug and alcohol and other issues like trends among their students. So there's been an uptick in the amount of marijuana that's being vaped. So that's why we're sort of folding this information in here. The director of pediatric research, Dr. Minkoff, again said, inhaling combusted, so that's smoked or vaped cannabis, can damage lung cells. It may increase virus replication, and it does affect your ability to fight off infections. So this is a recipe for disaster, you know, with COVID around us. So to sum things up, the American Lung Association sort of, and this sort of sentiment is similar for people from the CDC and the Surgeon General and other leading health organizations. Smoking and vaping cause harm to the lungs and leave tissue inflamed, fragile, and susceptible to infection. Tobacco smoke and vape emissions, because of all those particles and chemicals we just talked about, can affect the function of the lungs' natural defense mechanisms. You're pissing off your lungs, basically. And this may make it harder for lungs to fight off a respiratory virus, and it also sets up that person who smokes or vapes for more serious COVID-19 complications. So
it's time. Quitting smoking and vaping can better equip your body to fight off this disease and reduce the chance of the most severe symptoms. So if you or someone you know is looking to use this time in quarantine or the threat of COVID as an excuse to quit, feel free to visit our 5th seminar.
Yeah, you can watch our webinar 5. We'll sort of focus on these 3 quit resources, or you can go to communityincrisis.org and sort of check them out whenever you want. But there's great information on smokefree.gov website. There's text support and a wonderful app that will sort of help you on that journey and help make sure that quit is successful. We hope that what we've presented today will help you to make more informed decisions about how you want to live your life.
And if you have any further questions, don't hesitate to visit communityincrisis.org.
Thanks.